Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to watch my video of the Puma Cup race from Donington Park on Saturday, May 29th, 2021. I thought I'd try and do something a little bit different for this video and give you an audio commentary rather than just watching the static GoPro camera front and rear. I thought doing it this way it'd give me a good chance to explain some of the things that I'm thinking as I'm racing around, draw your attention to some particular things that are happening around me on the track, and generally just make it a better and more engaging experience for you to watch. There were 7 cars entered for this round of the Puma Cup, and qualifying went incredibly well for me. I was surprised and over the moon to get second place on the grid. Just a handful of tenths behind Jamie Clare, and only a couple of tenths off my personal best around this circuit. So second on the grid out of 7 Pumas, going to chase down Jamie ahead and try and keep the guys behind. Okay, so it's a rolling start here at Donington, and you can see me just down the back straight now. I've spent the first green flag lap trying to get the brakes warm, trying to get some heat into the tyres. With a few setup changes we made on the geometry at the front of the car, it did mean that in qualifying it took a little while longer to get the tyres up to temperature, so I was quite mindful of that. But coming out of the S's here, I was hoping to be on Jamie's bumper, and whether it was just lack of concentration or not, who knows. But yeah, I didn't. Well, he dropped me down the start line. So the priority here down into turn 1 is just be mindful of my mirrors, see where everybody is, and luckily I arrive at Redgate with quite a bit of space. There's the Mazda behind that you can see in the bottom left hand corner rear view mirror, and a Mini just ahead of me. But so far so good. I'm now looking ahead of me, make sure nothing's happened down at the old hairpin, and make sure there's no threat from behind. Again, mindful of the tyres. I can see Ross Morris in the blue Puma in the background there having a lunge on the Mazda, and I was a bit wary that he was going to have a go at me as well, but his attacking move into the corner compromised his exit, and you can just see him getting overtaken by, I think that's Gary Jones in the black Puma, and I think John Boult also got him in the red one, or if he didn't then it looks like he's about to now. So I'm now in a position where I can see Jamie ahead, but I've got a decent gap, but I can see the guys attacking behind me. So it's a case of trying to keep my concentration, eyes forward, try not to drive in the mirrors. But when you're aiming for a podium around here, and you can see second, third and fourth, third, fourth and fifth all in your mirrors quite closely, it's difficult to ignore what's going on behind. But here we go, that's the end of lap 1, just coming up now as we exit the S's. So there we go, that's the first lap done. Now what I'm looking for here down the start line the first time is for my pit board on the left. It's bright yellow and it says Matt on it, not that I'd expect you to be able to read that. There's not a lot they can tell me on the first lap that I don't know already, but it is helpful to know where on the pit wall the pit board is going to be. Just so you know what's going on with the pit board, if you look in the centre of my car on that blue plastic panel, there are 2 digital readouts there. The one on the left gives me an awful lot of information about my own performance on the circuit. It lets me know the lap times that I've been putting in, the sector times, whether I'm ahead of my personal best or behind, so on and so forth. But the pit board tells me information that I can't possibly know from inside the car. So gaps to the cars in front and behind, and also the amount of time left until the end of the race. So that's why we have the pit board. It's very, very useful. It is difficult to read even at 95 or 100 miles an hour in a Ford Puma, let alone a Grand Prix car. But yeah, it's invaluable, and I'm very grateful to the guys that work on the pit wall. Mark Murphy this weekend, Aaron Grant, and of course trustee Spanners Mark Chappell. So back to the racing, flying down the Starkey Straight. We normally get up to about 103, 104 miles an hour before we start braking for the S's down here. We don't get out of 4th gear. Oh yes, just remembered this bit. You see ahead there Jamie in the blue Puma. He got held up badly by the 2 minis around him. Not sure what was going on, but it gave me a cracking run. You can see I've got the pace on him here. I do get the overlap headed into Redgate. However, It's lap 2, I'm not going to risk anything, I'm going in on the tighter line, it's not worth an accident, so I'd back out of it. Maybe I will come to regret that, but given the general pace Jamie had over the weekend, it certainly wasn't worth risking ending my race at the end of lap 2 or causing damage to either of our cars. Similarly, I thought it'd be worth following him for a few laps. You know, it's quite rare you get to sit behind somebody of Jamie's calibre and this closely and see what he's doing, so maybe I could pick up something with braking points, with lines, general body language and attitude of the car. So that was the plan here, because I can see in my rearview mirror that John and Gary are having their own scrap. I was hoping that with those two battling each other they would slow each other down and I'd be able to drive away a little bit, but yeah, chance would be a fine thing. Those two guys they're too good they're too good to lose too much time battling each other. And you can see that John in the red car has got ahead now of Gary in the black one. So I'm now thinking, do I push and chase down Jamie? Do I just settle into my rhythm, hit my own lap times and let the race go as it will? Those decisions kind of went out the window around this point, because I remember thinking, I'm in the Puma Cup at Donington Park, my home circuit, and I can see the leader. He's not that far ahead. Maybe he's got an issue. Let's attack. And what happens when you attack? You outbrake yourself, you completely miss your apex, you run wide on the marbles, you have to get off the throttle, your revs drop, your speed drops, and the leader flies off into the distance, and you've now got John Bolt in the red Puma behind, who's just closed up about 5 or 6 car lengths. Complete foolery by myself, and it gave John the chance to go past here. And look at that. Ooh, that was mighty close. There was no contact between myself and John, I'm pleased to report. I've looked at the footage from his car as well as my own, and I'm confident that I didn't do anything wrong there. I did leave him enough room. I think he was just braking on the outside and it was quite dusty there, and he didn't manage to slow the car down as much as he would have hoped. John, if you're watching, I hope you don't think that there was any I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is. There was certainly no malintent or anything like that. It's just one of those things, and of course I'm glad that you didn't break your car on that incident and managed to stay in the race. So right, recap or review rather. We've got Jamie Clare ahead of us, just turning into the S's now. I think at this point the gap is about 4 or 5 seconds, and given the fact I had my running wide at Redgate the lap before, I thought he'd have gone away further. So I'm now driving along thinking maybe Jamie has lost some pace between qualifying and now. Maybe the track temperature has gone up a bit and affected his handling. Maybe he changed something on the car, the setup, the pressures, the suspension click, something like that between sessions, because he's not pulling away at the rate I would have expected him to. Now, it could just be that Jamie's driving within himself and keeping me at a safe distance, but I don't know that, so I decided to push on and see what I can do to keep the pressure on, maybe force him into a mistake or exploit any disadvantage that he might have found coming into this race session. Now, it's all well and good focusing on Jamie ahead, and of course, generally speaking, in a race car it is always better to focus ahead rather than behind. But whilst all that was going on, you'll have noticed in the rear-view camera that Gary Jones in the black Puma is starting to creep up. Now, a little bit of background on Gary and myself. Every time we've raced at Donington, Gary and I have been very, very close on lap times. In fact, last time we were here in September, I think it was, Gary beat me to pole position by 0.01 of a second, so a hundredth of a second, around the best part of 88 seconds of lap. So yeah, Gary and I have always been close on lap times, but he just tends to do a bit better in the races than me. That is something I've been working on, and looking at being gentler on the tyres to start with, and a few setup changes I mentioned earlier were with a view to trying to protect the tyres as well. So while I've got a chance to talk about the tyres, because you can see in the mirrors the gaps are fairly static at the moment, in the Puma Cup we run the Dunlop Durezza DZ03G, which is one of the MSA mandated tyres on the 1A, 1B or 1C list, I think. I could be wrong with that. It's a semi-slick tyre. It's got a huge contact patch with a handful of cuts in to look after yourself in the wet, and it's just a fantastic tyre. We run them every circuit, all conditions, sunshine, rain, snow, sleet, and as long as we manage to get them up to temperature, then they do a cracking job. I would, however, like a bit more grip from mine, as you can see, because look how much Gary's just closed up on me in the space of 2 or 3 corners. I was a little bit compromised coming out the old hairpin because I tried too hard. Lost the momentum up the hill, and you can see Gary is now right on my bumper. I'm looking in my mirrors. I decide to stay over towards the right hand side of the circuit. When I realise he's not closing, I move a bit more middle and a little bit more over to the left. But again, under braking, he just noses up a little bit. So I attack the exit, stamp on the throttle as soon as I can. But he's not going anywhere. I'm not really pulling away, so I have to stay right as far as I can to defend into Redgate. Now I can see Gary in my mirror, but I need to keep my eyes forward and see where I'm going to hit my apex. He came flying up on the outside, but easily outbraked himself. I don't know if he was on the marbles or just brake too late to try and make the move, but either way he ran out wide, out onto the dust, and gave me a bit of breathing space. The thing about the Puma Cup, the cars are so closely matched on lap times, and as I mentioned earlier, Gary and I have always been very close. Just to be a little bit quicker isn't often enough to actually confidently make a pass. You could have maybe half a second to a second of natural pace over the car in front, but unless they make a mistake, it can be really difficult to get by. We're a good bunch of drivers in the Puma Cup. We try not to make it too difficult for each other. Of course we race hard, but we all want to bring our cars home safely in one piece. We're all good mates. We're all happy to have a drink in the paddock afterwards, shake hands, etc. So we don't want to be too naughty with things. By all means, race hard, but race fair. And I think Gary was a little optimistic going into Redgate that time. And although I don't know it in the car now, when we spoke afterwards, Gary told me that he was starting to suffer with brake fade, and it was those couple of lunges which sort of alerted him to the fact that yeah, he wasn't quite as strong on the brakes as he would have hoped to be. Okay, we're at that point of the race now. We're about 10-12 minutes in. I'm not sure how many laps have gone by, but the leaders are starting to come round and catch us up. You can see in my rearview mirror there's a car with a blue bumper. I can't honestly remember what that car was, but for those that don't know, the Puma Cup runs on the same grid as one of the other series that the Classic Sports Car Club run. This weekend it was the Turbo Tin Tops. Now the Turbo Tin Tops are, as you can see just there in the mirror, that's a Seat Leon, I believe. There's all sorts of cars in there: Leons, Golfs, Vauxhall Astras, lots of Minis. They are an awful lot quicker on the circuit than us, so at some point they do catch us up, and we don't want to get in their way. They're having their own race. They get a lot of the TV time on the live stream, and we don't want to be the guys that are ruining their fun. I'm sure they don't want to ruin ours either, but the fact that they're a heck of a lot faster than us means that more often than not we have to compromise to let them through. And it's precisely that compromise which has given Gary behind me a pretty decent run. He got out of the last corner quite a lot better than I did. He managed to close up, but if you keep your eye on him here under braking, it looks like he's having a go, but in actual fact he lost his brakes, and it certainly wasn't an overtaking manoeuvre on his part. His car just didn't slow down. He went wide, tripped through the gravel, and at this point Gary dived straight into the pits to make his mandatory stop. So I've now got a decent gap to Jamie in front. Gary's pitted behind, and I can't see the gap to the next car, which I presume is John Bolt, but I'll talk about John a little bit later, because unfortunately he did have an incident. I'm just not sure where it was in the race, so I don't know if he's the car chasing me or not. But at this point I've got a clear track in front, I've got a clear track behind, no pressure, so what I need to do is try and hammer out some lap times and keep an eye on the mirror for the leaders coming through so that I don't get in their way. Now, for those that don't know, in the Puma Cup, everybody has to make one mandatory pit stop at some point during the race. There's a pit window, which I could be wrong, but I believe it opens after 10 minutes and closes after 30. So you have to make your pit stop during that window. The mandatory stop exists because some cars have two drivers. In this race, it was the Jackson brothers, Neil and Mark, who were sharing a car. So in order to make sure they aren't disadvantaged by the fact that they're a two-driver team, everybody has to stop for the same amount of time. So being a driver on my own, I just sit in the pits for the required amount of time, catch my breath, discuss the race with Mark when he comes over to double check everything's okay, and during that time the two driver teams are going through their swap process, unbuckling, getting out, getting in, buckling up, so on and so forth. And it's just designed so that nobody has an advantage or disadvantage from being a one or two driver team, and it's a system that works pretty well. If you saw the last video I did at Oulton Park from a few weeks ago, it's not without jeopardy. I completely cocked up at Oulton Park and sat in the pits for approximately 30 seconds longer than I needed to, mainly because I was an idiot. I couldn't do sums, I got a bit confused, and yeah, completely read it wrong. I was very determined. Ooh, flipping it, that Astra was quick, wasn't it? Wow. I remember that happening actually, and being surprised in the car just as much as I was surprised watching the footage back just now. But yeah, the pit stop. When we cross the pit lane speed limit line, you will see the timer on the center console, the one on the right hand side with the 3 red buttons. That's a kitchen timer. That's like £3 off Amazon, and when I cross that speed limit line I start it, and I'm not allowed to cross the exit line before 2 minutes has elapsed. If I do misjudge it and I cross that line any earlier than 2 minutes, then I'll incur a 30-second penalty added to my race time, which frankly just wipes your race away straight away. So keen to avoid that, and I will discuss that a bit more on the pit stop. But for now, it's just a case of settling in, trying to hit the lap times, trying to be consistent with things, not make any mistakes, and because I know I can pit at any point from now on, I think as soon as I feel a bit compromised on the circuit, either I can see a bunch of cars coming up in my mirrors, which are going to slow me down as I let them by, or if there's a gaggle of cars up ahead which are going to slow me down as I try and get through them, that's the ideal time to make my stop. But at the moment, there's nothing around me. I've got Donington Park all to myself essentially, so I'm going to take advantage of it and keep pushing on. Now might be a good time actually that I've got the circuit to myself just to discuss the lap times a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, I've done more laps around Donington Park than I have at any other circuit in the UK. It's well and truly my home circuit, and that's not just because it's nearest to where I live. Pretty much all of my motorsport firsts have happened at Donington Park. It was the first track that I came to spectate at, it was the first track I drove around, or was driven around, first track that I drove my own car around, first track that I marshalled at, first track that I raced at. You know, everything happens at Donington, and I love this place. Previously, my best lap time around here was a 128.5. I didn't quite make that in qualifying, but now I've got a chance, I can actually talk you around the lap. We get up to this first corner red gate in 4th gear at about 100 miles an hour, and brake hard into 3rd gear and grab the apex and stamp on the throttle as soon as possible. It's really important to get the throttle down early there, because you carry so much speed through Hollywood, which is here, and this left-hander Craner Curves is terrifying. Some drivers take it flat, but I have to have a little confidence lift. I can't do that flat. And then 3rd gear for the old hairpin. Again, it's a they call it a hairpin, but it's such a fast corner. You grab a load of curb on the inside, drift it all the way to the outside to try and get a good run all the way up this hill. Now this is a tricky one. This is McLean's. Back down to 3rd gear, grab some curb but not too much because it can bounce the car, and then just drift it out to the left. Now in the run up here to Coppice, sometimes you want to grab 4th, but not on this lap. I leave it in 3rd, pick the first apex there. There's another one coming up. There it is, and then we're on to the longest straight. The car in front of me, Toby and Lisa in their Fiesta ST150, they've got a ridiculous amount of horsepower compared to me, and you can see how much they pull away. We get up to about 105 before braking here for the S's in third gear. Loads of curb, stamp on the throttle, and yeah, that's that'll be Lisa actually, because she drove the first stint for their team. Now you'll see me put the indicator on there. That was just to let my boys on the pit wall know that it was my intention to stop at the end of this next lap. There's not really much for them to do on the pit stop, but it is good for them to know that I'm intending to come in. This weekend, Aaron, Mark and Mark were working on the pit wall for me. Mark Chappell keeping a general overview of things and making sure that Murph and Aaron knew what they were doing. It was Murph's first time on the pit wall, and we threw him in the deep end, gave him all sorts to do, and he handled it pretty well actually. Hanging out the pit board, making sure the correct information was on it, so on and so forth. So at this point, I'm on the other side of the circuit, but the boys in the pit wall will be getting ready because they know that I'm coming in at the end of this lap. On the pit stop, Aaron has a data sheet for checking tyre pressures and tyre temperatures. We don't always get a chance to do that in the pit stop because sometimes it's a bit hectic in there and there's other stuff going on. But generally speaking, Aaron will check the tyre pressures as a priority. We aim to run these tyres at 30 psi when they're hot. Any more than that or any less than that, and either the performance or the durability is compromised. So here we go. I'm about to make my stop. I will stay nice and left, get the car slowed down as late as possible, and then just watch my left hand, waiting for the pit stop line. There it is, hit the timer. Now there's a 60 kilometre limit in the pit lane, speed limit, but to be honest it doesn't matter what speed you do because you're time limited. So you can roll down at 20 kilometres per hour or 50 or 60, but it doesn't mean you're going to get out of the pits any sooner. Right, let's hear what Mark has to say.
Hard work, incredibly hard work.
Why came in early?
Eh?
Why came in early?
Yeah, I figured.
Tyre pressures, you alright? Or
Yeah, it's just hot, it's getting squishy.
what's tyre pressure for?
I don't know about it.
You alright?
Yeah, it's just hard work. It was intense keeping up with Jamie, that first part.
You're doing well with bud.
Yeah, I'm impressed. Gary's got a bit of pace on me, but every time he's had a go, he's made a mistake.
I saw that in turn one.
I'm taking credit for that.
You won't move out on him.
No, I forced him out the outside,
Oh, okay.
and he ran out of road.
That's what I meant.
He attacked me at the chicane
Yeah.
and overcooked, and yeah, I've got to say, I'm going at 150.
No, you're doing well, mate, you're doing well.
Can you make a point of putting the time to go on the bottom for me?
Yes, it's on down.
Right, okay. What time are we to go?
What's time left?
18 and a half, okay. Right, close the door up, I'll get gone. Cheers.
So there we go, that's a typical pit stop. We just generally have a chat about things. Now you'll see the timer is like 150 something now. I'm just coming up to the pit lane speed limit exit line, and I don't want to hit that any before 2 minutes, and you see it just clocks 2 minutes as I cross the line. I put my foot down, check all the mirrors, make sure there's nothing coming. There was that little Fiat, is it a Cinquecento and a Bath 500? I don't know, but yes, it was a bloody good pit stop, and I'm going to blow my own trumpet here. After Oulton Park, where we made that mistake, I was absolutely dedicated to making sure that we nailed the pit stop this time. We did a practice stop in qualifying, measured which garage, we made a note of which garage we stopped at, and then I measured how long it took to get to the pit lane speed limit line from there. Not just content with doing it the once, after the session check the GoPro, check the speed I was going, just tried to cover absolutely everything on that pit stop, and I'm very, very proud and pleased to report that when the timings were published at the end of the race, we had the best pit stop of anybody on the grid. And although I didn't check thoroughly, I'd be very surprised if any other competitor on this day beat me. I crossed that line in 2 minutes and 3/10 of a second. So you can imagine how far the car can go in 3/10 of a second, or how far it doesn't go when you're crawling along at pit lane speed limit speeds. That was just awesome. We probably lost 1 car length to the time limit, but relative to the other cars in the Puma Cup, I'm sure we gained some. So that outlap that you've just seen, again, you're fairly confident there won't be anything wrong with the car, that everything's just going to be as normal. But sometimes just sitting for 2 minutes, temperatures can rise, things can just happen, so you're always a bit wary on the outlap just to make sure everything is okay, and on that one it absolutely was. So now into the second lap after the stop, it's a case of trying to figure out where everybody is on the circuit, where I am relative to the other Pumas, who's stopped, who hasn't, and at the minute I've not got a clue. The guys on the pit wall, they can only show me information that's a lap old because of the way the timing system works. So I'm a little bit in the dark here, although I do spot on the left hand side there's a red Puma. I'll point that out on the next lap in case you missed it that time. That was John Bolt. Unfortunately, he and the Jackson brothers had a very slight coming together in terms of contact, but the consequences were quite dire for John. He took some serious damage to his car. Thankfully he's okay, no injuries to report of, but he'll be devastated. I can only imagine how he must have felt when he saw that damage. If it happened to me, it would be season over, no question. So yeah, just I don't want to say thoughts and prayers, that's too naff and cheesy, John, but fingers crossed you can get everything sorted and we will see you on the grid again for some point this year. It's just horrible to see something like that happen, so fingers crossed and all the best, John. I'm going on memory here, but I believe my pit board, when I came around on that last lap, said that I was about 12 seconds behind Jamie and about 5 seconds ahead of Gary. Now I know that Gary had got decent pace and was catching me in the first half of the race before his stop, but he had that brake problem, and I didn't know that he had a brake problem. So when I saw that Gary's about 5 seconds behind me, then that forces me to concentrate a little bit and think, right, this isn't over, I'm going for a podium, that was always the goal, but the thing is I'm in second place and that would just be a dream result, so I've got to keep concentrating, got to keep going for that. And one of my bad habits is that I get a little bit paranoid when I'm in the car. It's a psychological thing, it's entirely on me, but I do. And every chance I get, my eyes are flicking up to the rearview mirror. You probably can't see it on this footage, but I assure you I'm doing it. Is there a dot there? Is there a car there? Is it Gary? And again, I'm looking at the pit board down here. I can't remember what it said, but I do remember the lap times were fairly static. So I'm not catching Jamie, and I'm not pulling away from Gary behind me. So again, clear track, just head down and keep going. Speaking of what happens, has anyone seen that jet fly over? Yeah. I remember seeing it in the race and it caught my attention, and afterwards when we got back to the paddock and we were just chatting about things, Mark mentioned that an enormous jet came over. It might even be on this lap. We're getting over to the east side of the circuit, which is where the airport is, so I wonder if it's on this lap or not. We're just coming up to McLean's corner, and between McLean's and Coppice is the flight path. The planes come in from right to left just about where we are now, but no, again it doesn't look like it's on this lap. Maybe it's the next one. But yeah, that's quite a sight, and I know you should be concentrating on the racing and what's ahead of you, but when you see something like that come flying by so low as well, And even considering how loud it is in the Puma, you know, there's no soundproofing in this car, and the exhaust is quite loud, much louder than a standard exhaust. You can still hear that jet when it comes thundering over. So, where are we now then? We are approximately 29 minutes into the race, so maybe another 11 minutes left. Oh, there goes Toby in the ST150. Do you remember we saw Toby earlier? Toby and Lisa actually used to race a Ford Puma. It was a much higher spec'd Puma than the one I've got, and they ran it in the tin tops. I believe they ran it for about 10 years, and this is their first year with the Fiesta, which is much faster. It's a beautiful car. It's you know, the sort of dark blue and metallic orange, but I was surprised how well I held on to them around these twisty bits. They should have been flying away from me, and in the bits where they put their foot down, they were. Spoke to Lisa after the race, and Toby as well for that matter, and they both said that they had some horrific handling issues. The car understeering, oversteering, generally being quite unpredictable and difficult to drive, which is saying something, because of course they're both used to driving a Puma, and the Puma is famous for how stable it handles. Now, of course, my Puma is set up for racing and it's got big sticky tyres on, but generally speaking, you don't see us hacksawing at the steering wheel. It tends to be you know, quite a smooth input. You see there, one input there, flick it over to the left, same again, and straighten it up. There's no sort of dabs of opposite lock or tightening up the understeer or anything like that. It's a very stable and predictable car, which is one of the reasons I joined the Puma Cup. When I was looking for a race series to start with, to sort of resurrect my racing career, there were a few options, and I chose the Puma Cup. One of the reasons was that it was one of the few cars that would fit in my garage. Oh, here come the leaders again. They came round quick this time, didn't they? Flipping heck. Again, that's the top three going for the outright, and luckily I didn't cost anybody any tenths of a second, so I'm pleased about that. But yeah, the Puma fits in my garage, which is a bonus. I wanted a series that was relatively simple in terms of car setup and mechanical knowledge and ability. Because everything on the Puma is pretty much standard, there's no way that another driver can really get an advantage over you. We all run the same engine with no modifications, we all run the same ECU, so that the cars are all mapped identically for things like revs and top speed and how the fuel goes into the engine and blah blah blah. We have hugely uprated suspension, and we take as much weight out of the car as we can to get down to the weight limit, which is mandated for all Puma Cup cars. So nobody's got an advantage over anybody. Although that said, my car hits the weight limit perfectly, but I'm a bigger driver than the average, so my body weight is a disadvantage compared to some of the other drivers. I've never been able to quantify how much it accounts for things, but the laws of physics say it counts for something. Whether it's enough to make a huge difference to my result, or I honestly just don't know, and I would certainly never use my body weight as an excuse. But it's one of those things. Just have to deal with it. But yeah, back to the Puma Cup. So we all run the same tyres, the same ECU, the same parts. So everything is pretty much pretty standard. When it comes to, you know, luckily I've not had any accidents. I've not had anything that needs repairing as such from damage. But again, all the parts are standard. You can just jump on eBay and grab whatever you need, and it'll fit. Unfortunately, last year at the Burkett Relay at Silverstone, I blew an engine. It had been hammered too much. It was on 170,000 kilometres, that engine, so it certainly lived its life. And a couple of days later, jumped on eBay, found an engine for 260 quid, had it shipped directly to my mates Rob and John and their old man, who run a garage in Sheffield. Took the car down, engine was fitted in a matter of days, and that's the engine that I'm running now. It pulls beautifully. There's no sort of compromise in going for second-hand engines. Everything's just so easy. Just jump online, grab what you need, fit it to the car, and go racing. So, and then of course the final thing that really did it for me was the budgets. We get an awful lot of track time in the Puma Cup compared to some of the series. Our entry fees are around the £400 to £450 mark per event, and for that we get a solid 30 minutes of qualifying and then a 40-minute race. So in terms of track time per pound, or like minute per pound, or the other way around, or whatever, it's as good as you get anywhere. So with the closeness of competition, the ease of parts and managing the car through the season, it was a no-brainer. Puma Cup is where I decided to go racing, and I can see myself being here for quite a long time as well, because well, it's just awesome. Everybody who competes loves it, and that plane's still not been over yet. I'm starting to think I was imagining it. There can't be many laps. Look how fast this Fiat is. That's a Fiat 500 at Bath, and just flew by me, and I wasn't hanging about because I can still see Jamie up ahead. I'll wait until we get the next... Oh, there he is. That's Jamie 2 cars ahead, I believe. So it's the Fiat and then Jamie. So that 12-second gap has now come down to that as a visual. And, oh, is that Jamie? I can't believe it is. I don't think I got that close to him. Let's see if we get a better view as we go around Redgate. Is that Jamie? No, that's a Mazda. Mazda RX-7. They also run in their own standalone series on the same grid as us. And some circuits they're quicker than us, but around Donington Park we'd got them covered. Our advantage is all in the corners and the braking zones, and at Donington that's more important than outright power. So we'd got the measure of the Mazdas on this occasion. I do remember at Snetterton they were pretty hefty down the straights, but again at Snetterton there are some tight and twisty bits. So generally speaking, our lap times are quite similar, even though at different points of the circuit we are either a lot faster than them or they are a lot faster than us. Any sign of the Jumbo? No, not this time. I'm going to cheer when that plane comes over, unless I've missed it. Did any of you guys see a Jumbo jet fly earlier on? I swear I'm not making it up. I really am. Right, how long left? Probably about 3.5 minutes according to my little timer here. I've told you why I joined the Puma Cup. I've told you a bit about the guys that I race with, a bit about the setup, the format, how bloody hot it was in there. I'm starting to run out of things to talk about. So as far as my mindset is concerned at this point, I'm starting to think that second place is actually going to happen. And put this into perspective, I've been running in the Puma Cup for 3 years. I have had podiums in the past. I've had a number of third places, and actually at Anglesey in my first season I picked up 2 wins. It was a double header meeting and I came first in Puma Cup on both races. However, I was the only Puma Cup that turned up those days, so whilst I was very proud to have won the races, because I did pay my entry fee, I did make the effort to go to the track and race around, and I managed to see both checkered flags. Of course those wins were a little bit on the hollow side because I wasn't actually competing against anybody. I take the trophies, of course, no problem, but to put it into context, most Puma Cup racers have had 3, 4, sometimes 5 of us competing. More often than not, there is a couple of beginners who, with the best will in the world, and you know, I was so far off the pace when I started, and the beginners have been again this time around. So, respectfully to them, and I do mean respectfully because I've been in their situation. You know, it's tough. The learning curve is quite steep. Those podiums I've had in the past, they've sort of felt a little bit tokenistic. And when I saw the entry list for this round, there were 7 Pumas entered, which is a healthy entry for the Puma Cup. There were no debutants. Everyone here this weekend has raced before. We know how fast Jamie is because of his pace at Oulton Park, and also from when he ran in the Puma Cup way back when. I think it's about 4 or 5 years ago. Everyone knows Jamie's quick. But one of the entries this weekend was Ross Morris and Alex Eacock. Alex helps run the Puma Cup, so he knows what he's doing. Heads up EMC with his father Kevin and brother Ben. They sell an awful lot of the parts for the Puma that you need to go racing. They're always on the end of the phone for advice, that kind of thing. The point I'm making is that Alex knows how to drive a Puma bloody quickly, and he was partnered with a chap called Ross Morris this weekend, and Ross has got a huge amount of experience racing Porsches at quite a high level, so he's no stranger to going fast around a racetrack. And when I saw their name on the entry list, coupled with Gary, who I mentioned earlier, Gary and I have always been fairly nip and tuck in the Puma Cup, I genuinely thought that 4th or 5th was about where we would be. Thinking that Jamie would run off into the distance, Alex and Ross would hook it up straight away. Gary's normally got pace on me. John Bolt in the red car mentioned earlier, whenever he and I have raced, it's always been pretty close as well. So in terms of expectations, I thought, 5th is about par, 4th would be a good result, and a podium would be out of this world. So here I am with maybe 1 or 2 laps to go, and I'm in a solid 2nd position. Having qualified up in 2nd as well, so it was just mind-blowing. I was so chuffed to be within 2/10 of my personal best in qualifying, and I set that personal best time after a full day of pounding around. When you've got your eye in, the car's dialed in, you're in a good rhythm, and I set that 28.5. So to get a 28.7 in a 25-minute session on the morning of this race, that was fantastic. I was over the moon with that, and then when I saw that it had translated to 2nd place on the grid, that was just incredible. I won't lie, I didn't think that I was going to be able to hold 2nd place. I thought that as a one-off lap, fair and fine, but over the course of the race distance, I thought the other guys would have better consistency and they would probably eat me alive in the second half of the race. But as it transpired, Gary had his issues with the brakes. Unfortunately, John had to retire after contact with the Jacksons. And was that the checkered flag? I can't see if that was a checkered flag or not. Maybe one more lap to go. Do I start cheering going around this corner? No, I don't. So I think we're on the last lap now. So yeah, back to what I was saying. I'm rolling around in 2nd place, and this feels like the best race I've ever had in the Puma Cup. I had some solid wheel-to-wheel early on, with almost made a pass for the lead, if you remember, on lap 2 or 3. Defended hard from Gary, from John Bolt. It's just great. That's why you go racing, for those kind of feelings. And once the race had settled down, it's still not over. You might not be wheel to wheel, but particularly with oil going down at Redgate or the pressure fluid from Alex and Ross's car, there's always that bit of jeopardy. There's always that something that could take it all away from you, and you start to think, shall I back off a little bit? Shall I just drive within myself? But then that can break your rhythm. And if you arrive at a corner a little bit slower than you normally do, but you brake it a little bit later, it just sort of throws everything out of kilter and makes it tricky and makes you vulnerable to mistakes. So the best thing to do is just head down and crack on. Now, I think this is the checkered flag. Is it? Yep, there you see, just way over on the left. There you go, 2nd place, Puma Cup at Donington Park. I was rather happy about this. You sort of take a moment, get your breath back, take a few deep breaths. Those punches, they were for Siobhan and little Jason. Aaron, who was helping me on the pit wall, his fiancée and son, little 5-year-old Jason, were out at the side of the circuit cheering me on, which was great. So thank you very much for coming, guys. And yeah, cool down lap, just waving at the marshals, saying thank you to everybody and trying to soak it up a little bit. I know quite a few of the marshals at Donington Park, having marshalled there myself, so I don't know who I'm waving at, but I sort of feel that there's a chance they might know me, and I don't want to be the guy that just drove past and didn't say thank you. Not just to the marshals that I know, know, but of course every single one of the marshals, the rescue crews, the medics, the people up in race control, who all form part of that voluntary community that make racing possible. It's cliche to say it, everybody does, but we literally couldn't go racing without them. So thank you so much to all the marshals, and this is the slowing down lap is the chance that you get to say thank you. You spot a bit of orange at the side of the circuit, you wave to them, you clap them, you give them the thumbs up, and you let them know that you appreciate them giving up their day so that we can enjoy ours. I think I'm gonna just about sign it off there. Obviously this is the slowing down lap back to the pits. What a day. Mark Murphy came to see me race around for the first time. Mark's an old mate from Coventry who before this I'd only seen once in the last 15 years, so I'm really pleased that Mark not only has reconnected but also made the effort to come along and cheer us on. We kept him busy with the pit board and giving him jobs to do and such like. And then of course there's Aaron. Aaron's one of my cousins and it's his second race coming to watch us with the Puma Cup, and again his help's been brilliant. Having Aaron with us has meant that we can do more things with regard to data collection. Once upon a time there was simply nobody to hold the temperature gun and check the tyres. There was nobody to go around the car quickly afterwards and grab the tyre pressures, so we were missing out on data, and now that Aaron has come along, he does that for us. There he is on the left, just waving. Hi, Aaron. So yeah, massively grateful for the help that everybody gives me, and of course Mark Chappell is pretty much the reason that I'm racing, or able to race rather. I can't put into words how much Mark helps. He gives up so much of his time, never moans about anything. You give him one job to do and he'll think of another two to do off the back of it and do those as well without complaining. And it's not an exaggeration to say that I probably wouldn't be racing if I didn't have a mate like Mark. He's fantastic. You'll see him in a minute, because talking about being keen and just doing, I've barely just finished the race and there's Mark waiting on the trailer to line me up so that I can get on and we can see about packing up and celebrating and ready to go home. Final thanks goes to Derek Hawkins, appropriately as we're mounting the trailer, so to speak. The trailer belongs to Derek and he stores it at his house up near Wakefield, and every single time I've needed to move my car, Derek has been cooperative and said sure thing, you can borrow my trailer, which is just huge. So I'm going to shut up. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that this little audio commentary has been a bit more interesting than just watching the footage. And next event is Knock Hill in early July. I'm going to be sharing the car with Emily Glanville. Emily, very talented young racing driver from Scotland. She knows Knock Hill like the back of her hand, so I couldn't think of anyone better to share the Puma with for the first time. Thanks very much for watching. If any of you got any comments, if you've got any questions, please put them in the comments bit. So from Mark, myself, Aaron and Mark, thank you very much and goodbye.